I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, and I think people who thrive on them are completely mentally insane. But there is no way on God's green earth Indiana can go from 3-9 to making the national championship in 2 seasons. Nick Saban couldn't even do that with Alabama, and he's the best college coach of all time. Either Cignetti's on track to being the best college coach of all time, or something's going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. I'm doing my research, and I might just figure out the answer within 30 seconds of recording. It started off with I was on Twitter, and someone said, not when Mark Cuban is funding half of it. So then I did my own research. Mark Cuban is funding Indiana University sports programs, particularly in college football. He confirmed his donations to the athletic department in December 2024, contributing to the Hoosiers' success in the 2025 season. Cuban's donations are part of his efforts to support the transfer portal and enhance the athletic department's resources, which have already led to significant commitments from top players. So to break it down, they're winning off of NIL deals and transfer portals given from Mark Cuban. They are succeeding in the most sissy way possible. I don't like the transfer portal. I don't like the NIL deal. It's for a bunch of cowardly, unloyal college students to swap college teams just because they're not getting the playing time that they do or do not deserve. Or money. I have a proposal for anybody else who does not like NIL deals or the transfer portal. Jump Mark Cuban. I didn't say anything. What y'all talking about? I'm going to be honest with you. Once Mendoza leaves Indiana for the NFL draft in the next couple years, Indiana is going to be one of the most hated programs in history just because of Mark Cuban's donations. They're basically bypassing bypassing NIL deals and transfer portals because they have enough money to do that because of one individual. That shouldn't be allowed. That shouldn't be allowed. And I'm not coming from jealousy. I'm coming from a fact that I don't like the transfer portal. I don't like the NIL deals for this specific reason. No, anybody can just get any donation, go after any player they want to, just because one dingus won't keep his nose out of his favorite team. This guy said, don't you think it's a temporary blip up? They'll be good for 2 or 3 years, then be the doormat again. Gophers, Purdue, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State have had good years in the past, but then smacked back down to the floor. I can see where he's coming from. Think about it. Somebody's gonna get Cignetti. Let another team get another crazy donation. They're gonna buy Cignetti over to their team. Cignetti's team of grown men transfers, beating the snot out of 19-year-old 5-stars in the playoffs. I saw that their team is an average age of 23. I found a really good reply to one of the posts I was looking at. That's what he is doing through the portal. It's not Sig's fault the transfer portal is broken. He's taking advantage of a broken transfer portal. And then this guy replied, the whole thing is broken because of the money. There's entirely too much money in sports and gambling to not invest money keeping the portal and NIL contracts open. The Indiana football experiment actually worked. This video is made by First Team Football. It's 14 minutes long. Let's get into this and maybe we can figure out how Indiana actually became a top-tier football team within 2 years of going 3-9.
In the quiet, picturesque landscape of Bloomington, Indiana, there has always been a fundamental law that governs the sport of football. Thou shalt not win. For over 120 seasons, the Indiana Hoosiers were not just a losing program. They were the statistical anchor of college football. At one point, they were saddled with 719 defeats, more losses than any other team in college football history. This wasn't a bad season or a bad decade. This was a historical curse. Indiana was the ultimate punchline, the basketball school, where the football program existed only to hand out easy Big Ten wins and host a lackluster home crowd. The idea of the Hoosiers achieving sustained national relevance, the idea of them even competing for a title, was not just unlikely. It seemed like an equation that was impossible. But in a 2-year flash, that stunned the entire sport, that equation was brutally solved. The Indiana Hoosiers, the team synonymous with losing, finished the 2025 season 12-0. They walked.
Which, Matt, if we go back to look at the schedule, I was not a big believer of Indiana in the playoffs. Where is it at? Oh, past it. Hold on.
Right, Big Ten Titan of the conference in 12-0.
Here. I wasn't a big. I didn't believe in them. I did not believe in Indiana in the playoffs. If you look at their schedule, Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, Purdue. This does not equal up to what they are doing in the playoffs right now. It's very confusing. Because how do you go 27-14? You beat Old Dominion 27-14, and then beat Oregon in the playoffs 56-22. It makes no sense. It generally doesn't. That's my big problem. And then look, they only play good against good teams. Look at this. First time they played Oregon, 30-20. It was closer than it was this time. Illinois, 63-10. And then you look at a worse team. Old Dominion, 27-14. Iowa, 2015. Penn State, 27-24. Like, it's very confusing. Their schedule, how they play during the regular season, is not adding up to what they're doing in the playoffs.
They walked into the Big Ten championship game and took down the titan of the conference, the mighty Ohio State Buckeyes, to claim their first outright Big Ten title since the Truman administration in 1945. They locked up the number 1 seed in the college football playoff and finished the regular season as the number 1 ranked team in all the land. The gravity was broken. The anchor was lifted. In just 2 seasons, Indiana's record became a staggering 24-2, punctuated by 2 consecutive Big Ten Coach of the Year awards for the architect of the revolution. The man who orchestrated this impossible feat was Curt Cignetti, and his secret wasn't money or recruiting 5-star talent. It was sheer, uncompromising, winning culture. This is the story of how Indiana finally got the hire right, betting everything on a 62-year-old man who had been constantly overlooked, and the furious blueprint he used to turn the biggest historical loser into the apex predator of college football. To fully appreciate the scope of the turnaround, you must first understand the depth of the organizational failure Cignetti inherited. Indiana football operated under a culture of comfort and low expectations. A winning season meant 6 or 7 victories. Coaches were brought in with the understanding that sustained winning simply was not possible in Bloomington. When Cignetti first arrived in December 2023, he assessed a program suffering from terminal mediocrity. The facilities were outdated, the stadium banners looked ancient, and worst of all, the players and staff had internalized the historical losing. As Cignetti remarked, the atmosphere was a pervasive feeling of, "You can't get it done here." That thought was the true enemy, more dangerous than any opponent. The statistical reality of the program was appalling. Prior to Cignetti, the Hoosiers were 9-27 over the previous 3 years, with only 3 Big Ten victories. Any coach replacing Tom Allen was expected to fail, following the long, tragic line of those who failed before him.
We got a solid plan.
The athletic department, led by Scott Dolson, faced immense pressure to make a safe hire. A coordinator from a powerful Big Ten school, a former alum, or a young rising star. But Cignetti's hire was neither safe nor controversial. It was a massive, calculated gamble. Cignetti was 62, had never coached a major Power 5 program as a head coach, and was coming from James Madison University. He had been a perennial winner in the FCS and the Sun Belt, posting a ridiculous 52-9 record at JMU. Yet, when major programs came calling, they always looked past the man who was making a little over $600,000 a year at JMU. They saw his age and his non-traditional resume, not his unwavering record of success.
You said $600,000 a year, like that's not a lot. A lot of people don't even get $100,000.
And his non-traditional resume, not his unwavering record of success. Indiana, for the first time in its history, chose to ignore the glamour and bet entirely on results. They lured Cignetti away, paying JMU a $1.2 million buyout and giving him a starting salary of $4.5 million.
Dear Lord!
A massive raise, but still a fraction of what they would ultimately pay him. This hire was not about hope. It was about the furious, relentless pursuit of a proven winner. Curt Cignetti's arrival in Bloomington was not a quiet transition. It was a hostile takeover. He knew he had to shock the system. His first public act became the rallying cry for the entire revolution. At an Indiana basketball game, he grabbed the microphone and delivered a legendary, confrontational speech.
Purdue sucks! But so does Michigan and Ohio State! Go you!
This was the antithesis of the Indiana football identity. It was cocky, it was confidence, and it was a public declaration of war against the historical humility that defined the program. Cignetti admitted it was a challenge to the fan base, a litmus test to see if they were dead or just sleeping. He forced them to wake up and start demanding greatness. But the real genius was in the institutional overhaul that followed. Cignetti utilized the transfer portal, not as a lifeline, but as a surgical strike to immediately implement his culture. He didn't waste time on long-term high school recruits. He imported his entire winning apparatus from JMU. He brought his trusted defensive coordinator, Bryant Haynes. He imported his offensive coordinator, Mike Shanahan, and the head strength coach. Critically, he brought 13 key veteran contributors from his previous program, including star players like wide receiver Elijah Surratt. This wasn't just a coaching change, it was a mass transplant of culture. Cignetti was utterly uncompromising about the standard. Set the standard, enforce standards. Be where you're supposed to be. He demanded immediate buy-in to a program built on fast, physical, relentless, smart, disciplined, and poised football. The results were immediate and historic.
Huge thank you to Bear Mattress for sponsoring today's video.
Man, really?
Back to the video.
In 2024, the Hoosiers went 11-2, claiming a first ever college football playoff berth. In the eyes of the media, the criticism was swift. Easy schedule.
And they got first rounded.
But Cignetti, constantly beating his chest and telling reporters to Google him, simply used the doubt as fuel for 2025. Cignetti's ascent is the ultimate proof that culture and development trump blue blood pedigree in the modern era. The Hoosiers did not rise to number one by out-recruiting Ohio State. They did it by being the most fundamentally sound, disciplined, and crucially, the most physical team on the field week after week. Consider the roster reality. When Indiana marched to the Big Ten title game in 2025, their team featured only 2 former 4-star recruits and 0 5-star talents. They were winning with the players others had overlooked, discarded, or developed. Compare that with other playoff teams like Ohio State, Georgia, or even teams that missed the playoffs like Texas. Those teams have 60+ elite prospects on their roster. Indiana has 2. Cignetti showed an ability to identify and maximize talent, especially at the quarterback position. He installed Curtis Rourke in 2024 for the 11-win season, then transitioned flawlessly to Fernando Mendoza in 2025, who immediately transformed into a Heisman winner. The shift in identity was most profound on defense. Indiana became a defensive juggernaut, built on an old-school, blue-collar mentality. Cignetti explicitly challenged his defense. He saw on tape that his defensive line could whip the opponent's offensive line, and he demanded they do it. The 2025 Hoosiers defense was statistically elite, the number 2 scoring defense, allowing only 10.8 points per game, and were top 6 nationally in tackles for loss, sacks, and forced turnovers.
It's crazy.
They won by dominating the line of scrimmage, something Indiana had not done in a generation. They went from the losingest program to one that breaks the will of the opponent, as Cignetti proudly stated after one dominant defensive performance. Cignetti had created a championship atmosphere in a place where it was historically impossible. Winning wasn't a treat, it was the baseline expectation. This relentless focus on the here and now and the daily process allowed them to dismantle their historical roadblocks one by one. The 2025 season was a methodical march toward destiny. The Hoosiers went into hostile territory, beat the then number 3 Oregon Ducks 30-20, and secured one of the biggest wins in school history. They survived late game scares against ranked opponents because that's how Cignetti built them. The perfect 12-0 regular season was capped by a 56-3 dismantling of Purdue in a rivalry game. A dominant victory that Cignetti jokingly said made them a year late on his promise to be in the title game. This brought them to the ultimate showdown in Indianapolis, the Big Ten Championship, against the Ohio State Buckeyes. It was a clash of two undefeated teams, number 1 versus number 2, a blue blood dynasty versus the team that was supposed to be the sacrificial lamb. The game was a tense, physical battle, a true reflection of the culture Cignetti had forged. A low-scoring, defensive slugfest that the Hoosiers won 13-10. The Hoosiers did what they did best all season. Their defense pressured the mighty Ohio State Buckeyes into 9 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. They limited the high-powered Ohio State rushing attack. The Buckeyes finished with 100 yards below their seasonal average. Indiana won by being tougher, more disciplined, and better coached. As the clock hit 0, the entire narrative of Indiana football, the centuries of losing, the punchlines, the historical burden, was shattered. The streak of 30 straight losses against Ohio State, dating back to 1988, was
Dear
over.
Lord.
The 58-year drought without a Big Ten title was over. The losingest program became the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. There was no satisfaction in the journey, only in the continuous pursuit of the standard. The Indiana administration was left with one final responsibility: cementing the revolution. The success forced their hand in the most dramatic way possible. In October 2025, Cignetti was rewarded with an 8-year, $93.25.
Oh my gosh! That is $12 million a year. Just throwing that out there. I'm gonna have to deal with this Diego Pavia as a coach dude for the rest of my life, man.
$1 million contract extension. His annual salary jumped to $11.6 million.
Yep.
Instantly making him one of the top 3 highest paid coaches in the nation, behind only Kirby Smart and Ryan Day. The contract itself contains unprecedented language.
As long as it ain't as long as it ain't Kellen DeBoer, man, we still need to fire him. Fire him and Grub. I'm gonna find a way to bring Alabama into any of these videos. Promise you.
Requiring Indiana to perform a good faith market review after every season to ensure Cignetti's salary ranks no less than 3rd among active FBS coaches. If they fail to agree on a raise, all buyout requirements are waived, allowing him to leave freely. This means Indiana must pay him like an elite champion, or lose him. It is the ultimate contract that puts the organizational burden back on the administration to maintain the championship standard Cignetti has set. The rise of Indiana football is the most spectacular organizational success story of the decade. It is a massive 24-2 neon sign illuminating one central truth in modern college football. Talent matters, but the right coach with an uncompromising vision and the organizational support.
One coach can't fix a franchise. Dadgummit.
Culture transplant matters more. Indiana finally got the hire right. They bet on a winner who was constantly overlooked, and he didn't just break the gravity of their failure. He launched them to the very top of the mountain. The perennial joke of Bloomington is now the apex predator, and the only question remaining is whether Curt Cignetti will cap the most impossible equation in sports history by finishing the job and claiming the national title.
I need to know who Cignetti sucked off for the NCAA committee to become 13-0 against the most easy schedule I've ever seen, except for maybe Ohio State and Notre Dame, and still make it to the national championship. Who was it? Who was it? Who'd he suck off? I mean, we figured out our answer a long time ago. Not about the sucked off part. About how that became good. Mark Cuban donated, and they used the donation money to go to work with NIL deals and the transfer portal. Yay! They bypassed the system. A system that shouldn't be a thing. I'm out, man. Heck.